What's going on, everybody? It's Brian Trippe. Welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Live podcast. We interview the very best real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and business leaders all throughout the country. And today is no different. I have Flip Talk, the man, the rehabber in the country, Mr. Don Costa, with us today. How's it going today, Don?
It's going good, man. I'm loving it. Good day. Good to be talking to you and just living the dream, man.
It's really awesome to get, to talk to people who also have podcasts, which is really cool. But I think the big difference between you and a lot of the other folks that I see doing these podcasts is you're doing a lot of volume. You just got done telling me you're doing almost 200. You did almost 200 deals last year. Mm-hmm. I would love for you to kind of start right there and tell everybody what it is that you are doing specifically. I know you mentioned rehabbing, wholesaling, some other stuff, but what are you doing specifically?
So we are, I started as a rehabber specifically. That's where I started way back in 2003. And we now are rehabbing and wholesaling. So we do, in 2018, we did 197 deals, 58 were wholesales, 139 were rehabs. And this year we'll still be over the 100 range. Won't quite be as high because we switched our closing model to closing over the phone, which was a transition for us. So, but we're still in a high volume capacity. And yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, that's what we do is just, we were high volume rehabbers. I have an office right outside my door here. I'm in an office. I have the people on the phone, the AMs now on the phone right outside my door here, doing their thing. And it's a lot of fun.
Don, before we kind of unpack everything that you are up to today, especially like switching your your closing model and things like that, I would like to unpack a lot of that. I think a lot of people would be interested in hearing about that. But first, I want to know kind of how'd you get your start? You kind of, I read in your bio, you got started in 2003, but you lost it all during the crash. So I'd love for you to kind of take us through that progression. How did you get into real estate? And then what happened, I guess, in the crash? What happened specifically? And then how did you kind of rebuild it?
Absolutely. So started in 2003. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I think like a lot of us in this business, we wanted to be entrepreneurs. Real estate became the widget. I'd tried several other things before. I opened cell phone stores. I did a few other ventures before real estate that didn't quite fit. And real estate seemed to fit like a glove. So I started in 2003, door knocking, pre-foreclosures. Built a really nice business, started a property management company, a mortgage company, had a real estate arm, was flipping houses, multiple offices. Thought that it was never going to end. I was a tool, basically, for lack of a better term. I didn't have a real business in place. Thought it was never going to end. Opened a restaurant and nightclub. Was working on starting a sunglass line. You name it, because I just thought the money was going to come forever. And then the market changed in 2008. When it changed, I didn't think or see that it was going to change as drastically as it did. So I didn't react quickly enough. And again, I was arrogant. I thought everything I touched turned to gold. And I thought that I wasn't going to be affected. And I was deeply affected. Over a period of several years, I lost everything down to the nightclub. And that was the last thing I tried to hold on to. And then around 2011, me and the partners involved decided to finally shut that down. And so right around the end of 2011, I literally had nothing. Like I was going to the grocery store with a calculator. I was buying gas a gallon at a time with quarters, playing Russian roulette with the lights and the water bill. And, it was hard. It was a really, really hard time for me and my family, and at that point, I had thought real estate was what destroyed me. So scared of the world, scared of my shadow, scared of real estate, couldn't get a job. I had an associate's degree. They wanted a bachelor's degree. I was overqualified, just in a bad spot. I don't know if anybody understands. I mean, people say they're broke, but I don't think anybody understands like really being broke. Like my house was in and out of foreclosure, borrowing money from family and friends, bad situation. Had $1 million judgment against me because we closed down the restaurant. The landlord got $1 million judgment against me because not that he deserved it, but I couldn't afford to fight it. So I was in a bad spot. And 2012, at the end of 2011, beginning of 2012, I looked in the mirror and took a self-assessment on what I was good at. And the one thing I knew I was good at was identifying a deal, putting private money together and making it happen. So that's kind of where it came back, around to, stepping back into real estate.
Yeah. Don, for a second, I would love for you to kind of talk about that mindset shift and, going from, the losing everything, I guess,
Right.
And really and truly, like you said, being broke to getting back up and doing it again. And there may not be a lot of people who who can like that resonates with specifically, but I know that there are a lot of people that probably listen to the show who maybe they're going through something right now and they don't
Mm.
feel like they can like get back up or have the, even not necessarily capacity, but even have like even the want to, the will, the desire
Right.
to get back up. What does it take mentally to get out of that where you were and to get into that successful type of mindset?
You know, that's a fantastic question that people have asked me through the years, and I've been trying to figure out the right way to answer it. And you know, as I look at it, a lot of people will say, "Well, how'd you find the strength?" And I didn't find the strength. I had moments in the loss in that situation. Like I always tell the story about taking my family to Taco Bell one Saturday. I was going to take my family to lunch at a movie, went to Taco Bell, walked into a Taco Bell, a busy Taco Bell, ordered our food. My wife and kids went to sit down. I went to pay, and my credit card was denied. Um, had the guy run it again. It was denied again. Looked over at my wife, asked her if she had anything. She said no. I had to tell the guy to cancel the order and collect my family and leave Taco Bell. As entrepreneurs, we feel like we are rhinos, I guess, right? Thick skinned, like nothing can get us. And I was walking out of that restaurant, my head held high, like, just one more battle I have to fight. And my son tugs back on my arm and says, Daddy, why didn't this mean guy give us our food? And that was like a soul crushing moment, right? And because I realized that I was failing my family. And I had several of those, Christmases where, kids had asked for something and we couldn't buy it. And first thing they asked for when they wake up in the morning was that particular thing, going through all the presents, opening them and throwing them aside and still not finding that one particular thing. I mean, I had these soul crushing moments in that period of time. And I finally got to a point, I think, of sheer desperation. Like, because nobody, I don't know if we remember now or what it was like, 10 years ago now, right? But the people weren't hiring, they were laying off, they were firing, they were doing whatever. Like, it was a bad time, and I was out of options, and I had to assess, really, like I said, what am I good at? And that was terrifying for me because I thought real estate had destroyed me.
Mhm.
Looking back on it now, I was a tool. I was an idiot. I wasn't smart with my money. I didn't have a real business. I was a bottleneck in my organization. All the things I did wrong. Looking back now, I realized I destroyed me. It wasn't real estate. Had I been the man I am now, I could have taken advantage of what the market did, and we probably would be talking because I'd probably be at a beach somewhere, right? So, but it really was it just sheer. I have to make a change. I have to be a better man for my family. I have to do something. I can't just wallow in self pity forever. So that's number one. But when you talk about mindset shift, in both starts I had this moment where in the first one I was interviewing in 2003, I was interviewing the guy for a mortgage company. And I told him why I was there, that I was there to learn the financing side of the business because I wanted to be a real estate investor. And he leaned across his desk and said, go find properties. I'll put up the money. We'll split the profit. I went out and knocked on doors like I had $2 million, $3 million behind me. It was a mindset shift, right? The second time I sat with a guy in 2012 who said that he would back me on deals. And I remember the last meeting I had with him, my wife texted me that our water got shut off. And I made it a point in that meeting with him that I was going to close him to back me on deals. And the second he said that he would back me on deals, same deal, he put up the money, I do the work and split the profit. I went out into the world like I had $3 million behind me. And in fact, I told people I'm a cash buyer and I have money behind me. I'm looking for deals. And I realized that was my mindset shift in both occasions was I got in a situation where somebody gave me the power to know my value in the situation, right? And I think for anybody listening is I waited until I had somebody tell me that I had value behind me. But really if you have a deal, you can make a deal, put a deal together. You can wholesale it. There's going to be money out there. There's going to be the money there to make that deal happen where you can profit. So you don't have to wait for somebody to tell you you have value behind you. You have value behind you. If you can be good at identifying and making a deal happen and put it together, you should be going out there and doing something with it right now.
Yeah. Don, I want to just briefly just touch on something you said. You said the soul crushing moments, and they kept coming, and the Taco Bell story. That's incredibly powerful, and I'm sure there are people that are listening to this that can relate to that, or at least relate to a version of that. Here's my take on it. I don't think most people in those moments actually do what you did. Most people in those moments, they cower and they quit and they give up. And I think that right there, that moment is the difference between success and just staying where you are, status quo. What do you do in that specific moment? What do you think about that?
I think that there's a lot of truth to that, but again, I don't want to take credit I don't deserve. I cowered for a number of years. I mean, it wasn't like
Because
I
it's
changed
easy.
it. Yeah, it's easy to cower, and we do. I always talk about this like survival mode, right? We go into survival mode. We look at the pebbles in front of us, and not the one big rock that could change everything for us. We start focusing on the little things, not the one big change we can make. Tim Ferriss always says it best that he sits at Starbucks or whatever coffee shop and thinks about the one domino that's going to knock everything over, right? And when we get in survival mode, we're not thinking like that. We're thinking of the small things. And so it is easy to cower. And I can't do this because I got to pay my electric bill. I can't do that because I got to buy groceries. I can't do this because of whatever. And it's almost like an excuse to stay broken, if that makes sense.
It is. Well, I don't want to talk about any of the dark stuff anymore. Let's
All
talk
right.
about what's going on today, the good stuff, the great stuff. 197 deals in 2018. Going to do
Right.
high volume again this year in 2019. I'd love for you to kind of talk about, before we really get into those details, from 2012 to 2019, what has that progression looked like? How do you go from just maybe having a little bit of money back in you, and maybe it sounds like maybe just doing a few deals, to get to the point to where you're doing that kind of volume? It doesn't happen overnight. What
No.
does it take?
It takes a few things. I mean, it takes a great team. For instance, I have a phenomenal team. With the great team, it takes getting out of their way, which is a hard thing to do for any of us entrepreneurs. I think that was the biggest challenge for me, was not being a bottleneck and letting go. So that's number one, putting the right people in place and letting go. But it also takes a few things, thinking outside the box, if that makes sense. Like cash flow, especially if you're a rehabber, cash flow, properly cash flowing your organization can be the make or break when you're growing. A lot of us borrow, where we're borrowing from hard money. We're putting a certain amount of money down because they want skin in the game. And you can't effectively grow when you're not in the right mindset again, right? And you don't have money in the bank because all your money's in projects. So little things that I did was, going to lenders and saying and proving to them that I'm a better bet if I get 100% financing.
Mhm.
Because if I'm 100% covered on my holding costs, purchase costs, and everything on projects, and my money's in the bank, I can make decisions from a position of power. I can grow properly. So looking at my organization in a manner of not just following status quo with what people told me I should be doing, but looking outside the box on ways to make my organization more effective or to be able to grow healthier, is a lot to do with how we were able to pull it off.
So we hear people talk about, systems, processes, growing a team and things like
Mhm.
that. Give us some specifics on how to, some actionable things, maybe how to go from solopreneur, how to go from just I'm the person kind of doing everything, handling everything. You mentioned you're the bottleneck, which means
Right.
everything kind of goes through you. How do you go from that to making your first hire, your second hire, and having the confidence, feeling like you have the money behind you to make these hires and do these things and build that team?
I hate to say mindset. Mindset is a huge component of it. I think that's going to be the theme of this conversation. But um, there are a lot of times where we're not ready, right, to hire, but you need to hire because I mean, a lot of people will wait till they're in the weeds to hire, and then you can't effectively train somebody. You're going to let them down. They're going to let you down because you're in the battlefield, right? And how are you going to train the soldier to fight if they've never picked up a gun, right? Bad analogy, but in the middle of the battlefield, you need to have boot camp, right? So hire for where you want to be is kind of a philosophy I live by. I didn't coin that. A friend of mine coined that, but it's smart. Hire for where you want to be, even when you're not ready, because you really need to develop your people and to who you need them to be in your organization to be successful. And you don't have time to do that unless you do that before you're at where you need them. And so that's a practice that I've used is hiring for where I want to be. I brought my project manager on my first deal. Couldn't afford him. I knew the guy, which was an advantage, but I basically painted a picture of what this company was going to become.
Mhm.
And I knew he would be a great manager of our projects. And so, because he was a phenomenal manager of people. And I painted what the company was going to become. And, if you go for the ride with me, this is where you're going to be. And he bought it and he went for the ride with me. I couldn't pay him on the first couple of deals. He followed me around and learned. And then I paid him a couple $1,000s a month. And then I paid him more. And now he gets paid very, very well. And so it's been a practice of mine to hire for where I want to be, to hire for where I'm going, to hire people before I need them and develop them to who I need them to be, and and really take care of people, and have good people. I mean, that's number one.
Don, from there, from that point, after you make your first hire and you kind of see the kind of the snowball rolling, is it really just it picks up steam, or there's some specific, or maybe some pitfalls that we might see along the way as we try to make our second hire, maybe third hire, and things like that? Like, what are some? I mean, you mentioned it, about working, kind of on the business, not in the business, like we hear, like don't get in the weeds when you try to be more forward thinking. But like as we start to make some of these hires that we know we need, what kind of pitfalls could we potentially see come our way?
I mean, I think the pitfalls when it comes to hiring is one, people try to plug and play. We're trying to stick somebody into position and just assume that they got it. You really got to develop people into it. Especially somebody that's new to your organization. You don't want to put the weight of the whole position on their shoulders. You're going to crush them. You got to give it to them in pieces so they can grow into the person you need them to be. If you think about those of you who are listening to this that are business owners, I always use the example of me, put me, my business on my shoulders in 2012, I would have crushed myself under the weight. I wasn't ready for it. And so you got to treat your employees the same way. The second mistake people make is they're a bottleneck. They want to make every single decision. They're holding their team back. And I always use this analogy about, as entrepreneurs, we're pulling this cart up a hill and we're throwing the widgets and the people behind it. And we get to the top of the hill and we start to go down and we think we need to carry the cart down. We don't realize that if we just got out of the way or jumped in the cart, it would go a lot faster without us. Right. And that's the other thing with our team. And a lot of us as entrepreneurs, we hold our team back from greatness. And then I think the last thing that people make a mistake is they'll plug somebody in and think it's handled and they'll stop paying attention.
Yeah.
And if they do that, sometimes they got a bad apple that they plugged into their organization and it becomes a big catastrophe. So until you can really fundamentally let go of somebody and trust that they got it, make sure that you're paying attention to what's going on.
It's great stuff. I love that. Let's talk about what you're doing right now, Don. 197 deals. You broke it up for me a second ago. What's the breakdown? And then why did you shift? Why did you start doing wholesaling? Because it sounds to me like you mentioned you were doing primarily rehabbing. Why did you throw wholesaling in the mix? What's the percentage right now?
So wholesaling last year was 58 deals, 139 rehabs. This year we're going to be, probably 50-50 when it's all said and done and lands. We'll still be well over 100 deals. And I don't have a count right off the top of my head right now and where we're at on wholesales, but we've done a lot of wholesales this year. So the reason why we took wholesaling on was because, as rehabbers, you have this box, right? You have this box that things fit in or they don't, and you're throwing leads away. And we decided that we were going to do a large amount of marketing. In 2018, we sent out almost 1.2 million postcards. So we realized we were going to have a ton of leads coming in that didn't fit our box. And it was a hard decision for me to make because, they are two separate businesses. The reality is, the way you evaluate a wholesale deal, the way you evaluate a rehab, the way you manage each business. I mean, there's differences, there's similarities, but there's differences. And I was scared that the wholesale was going to cannibalize my rehab business. I was afraid that my acquisitions managers were going to take the easy way out. I can make an easy 5 or 10 grand as a wholesale, or I can stay on this lead for another week or two and maybe buy it cheap enough we can rehab it and make 20 or 30 or $40,000, right? So all those fears were in my head, but we decided to pull the trigger and work through them, and there were implications in the organization for sure, but we were able to work those out through this last year. And made, I mean, I've drank the Kool-Aid. I love wholesaling at this point in time. I mean, our biggest assignment fee today was 165,000 for a property we closed via text message, and didn't even talk to the seller until we were, halfway through escrow. So we didn't have to touch it. We didn't have to rehab it. We had to deal with contractors. Of course, I'm loving wholesaling now.
So I want to talk about that a little bit more. Do you think there are a lot of house flippers out there right now, rehabbers out there right now, who are kind of transitioning more to the wholesale side? I feel like I'm seeing it a lot right now. It seems like it'd be a pretty big trend.
I wouldn't say maybe more than usual. I wouldn't say necessarily more than usual. I think that a lot of house flippers are afraid to become wholesalers too. Everything goes back to mindset, like we've been saying all along, right? There are wholesalers that are scared to become house flippers because they're afraid, or they just don't have the experience in managing contractors and so on and so forth. And there are house flippers that, for various reasons don't want to become wholesalers because it does change your business. It changes your business dynamic in some ways. There are pluses and minuses to doing both. And, like right now we're fighting to find that balance between, somebody offering us stupid money for a wholesale and keeping our private money available, our contractors working, all that kind of stuff like that. So we're trying to find that balance in our organization without letting it swing one way or the other. So, but at the same time, the market is such that I think you should be taking advantage of both while keeping your company in set up in a manner to where if it swings back that you have to add value to everything you can, if that makes sense. So I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, no, it does. So you just mentioned change business dynamics to try to make that switch and try to do maybe a little bit of both, or what kind of business dynamic? Give me an example. Like, what have you found in your business that you've had to change because you are doing more wholesaling today?
Well, part of the implication of wholesaling is we've been able to monetize leads that we normally throw away. So that's the advantage. That's the good, right? The bad is, it's like, for instance, when you're a rehabber, especially if you're doing volume and you want to cash flow your organization properly, you gotta kind of have consistency in closings, right? Purchases and sales. You want to have that consistency. When we brought wholesaling in, my dispo guy, when he got his legs under him, basically was, one of the models we put in place is that he can't wholesale a property unless he can get what we're expecting to get as a rehab, or better, or somewhere near that. And anything below that, he's got to get approval in order to wholesale it. So we've kind of put that check and balance in place. But, he got his legs under him and he kept coming to me and he was getting these crazy numbers for these projects. And I was saying, yes, go ahead and wholesale. And I created this gap in my lead flow for the rehabs. I created this window where we didn't have a whole lot of purchases. So we had this gap. And what that did is that happened like June, July, August. And we bought some where we had renters that we had to go ahead and evict. Took some time to get them out. And so it created this gap in our capital cash flow that in the first quarter of 2019, we went from being, $100,000+ a week in gross profit to, basically operating at negative for a good month in incoming capital from rehabs only. And so that's an implication. And I saw that coming. I was able to mitigate, the risk of the organization. We started wholesaling a little more to compensate for that. But a lot of people don't see that kind of stuff coming, and that's the kind of stuff that could really impact somebody in a negative way, and the organization in a negative way. If you're flying and you make a change in your business, and also you have a 2 or 3 month gap in how you're cash flowing, that could almost effectively put you out of business. So there are things like that you got to look for when you're making changes in your organization. I always say that you can't touch water without making a ripple. Anything you do in your organization is going to have an effect, positive or negative, and you just got to look out for them when you're making those changes, if that makes sense.
Don, you did 139 rehabs last year.
Right.
That is a significant number. That is a gigantic number. Give me just a sense of what's a typical rehab project for you?
Oh, typical. Well, we do some complicated rehabs, but typical rehab is, I would say, what people would consider cosmetic. Roof, windows, AC, kitchens, bathrooms, that kind of thing would be our typical rehab project. We're usually in and out of them 3 weeks to 4 weeks. We don't have any that run any longer than that. Typically, we will do 6-week and 8-week projects, but we're pretty dialed in our timeline. The average rehab amount in our market is roughly 30, 35 grand on average. So, like I said, we do complicated projects. We do, 50, 60, 80, $100,000 rehabs, but the majority of them are the 30,000-ish range cosmetic type rehabs. So, and then I don't know if you have a follow-up question to that, but it really comes down to systems and processes when it comes to making that happen.
Yeah, I got a lot of follow-up questions. Well, so on average, that's like almost 12 closed deals per month,
right,
which means you probably have 40, if not more, kind of in that, maybe even 50, kind of in that pipeline at any one time, from bought to or under contract to buy, bought, haven't gotten to it yet, working on it, finished, and maybe it's on the market. In this whole progression, you got to. What is your like? Give me a sense of. We're going to talk about process in a second, but give me a sense of, like, when I say typical, what's the price point? What are you paying cash? Are you using hard money? Are you using private money? How many crews do you have running? There's a lot of dynamics to doing this many deals in a year.
Yeah. So at the height, the first quarter of 2019 was the highest point. We actually saw the wheels kind of start to come off the bus. Cracks in our processes was we had 65 projects in inventory. That's the largest amount we've had in inventory in some stage to date. So let's see here, crews, 6 to 8 crews, depending on what we have going on. What else? What were your other questions?
Yeah, no. Well, I just wanted to get I was asking all that stuff, not
Yeah.
necessarily you answer all of them, just to get a sense of what the business actually
Right.
looks like on a day-to-day basis. So give me a sense of your average price point. Like, what are you typically buying for? And I know it's going to fluctuate, but typically,
Yeah.
what's your bread and butter?
Our average all in for bread and butter is about 150 all in for
Gotcha.
just rehab holding costs. About 150 to 175 range is our average.
And you're in what market now? I forgot to even ask you that.
We're in Central Valley, California, so we're in Fresno. We are actually in about 8 markets in Fresno. We go from Bakersfield to the Bay Area in California. So, but we rehab usually within about an hour and a half of any direction of Fresno. Hour and a half to 2 hours is
Gotcha.
kind of
So 60 or so projects at one time,
right.
progression, whatever stage they're in. 65 at once, but you only have 6 to 8 crews.
Right.
Like, give me a sense of how that all works.
So we have a couple of project managers. We're very structured and systematized. First and foremost, we work with general contractors. We work with general contractors that have their own teams. So when I say crews, like I'm 6 to 8 general contractors is probably the better way to say it. And each general contractor may have, 2 teams, one has 3 teams type of thing. So they can do, it's not like they're going to do just a couple of projects. They'll have each team will be able to do a couple of projects. So if elaborate on that properly. So I have my project managers in-house manage the managers, which are the general contractors. The general contractors, when I say they have their teams, they're people that actually, like, they're not subs, they're people that actually work for them on some kind of hourly basis. So those are the type of contractors we look for to work with in our organization. And most of the contractors we worked with for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And we've been able to build out expectations, standardized pricing, materials, expectations, like all that's dialed in. So there isn't a whole lot of, reinventing the wheel every time.
So you're using about 6 to 8 GCs, but it sounds to me like you only have a few project managers in-house.
2.
Mm-hmm. So 2 project managers in-house that you're actually paying, like, on payroll.
Right.
Have you toyed with bringing in actual crews that are on payroll? Have you done that before? And what basically the question is, why are you doing it the way you're doing it? Is it just easier? It's definitely not cheaper, but it's probably easier to manage?
I feel like it's easier to manage. There's a couple. It's twofold. One, I feel like it's easier to manage, and 2, we develop our exterior trade just like we do our internal employee team, right? Like we like one of the contractors we worked with for over 7 years. We have a really solid relationship with the guy, and we know his crews real well. We know what their efficiencies and deficiencies are. So we work with them like they're on our team. They're independent contractors. They're contracted and all that kind of stuff like that. But we do work with them at the same type of level and relationship so that we can have efficiencies in place. And they're like an extension. The reason why I never did an in-house is because I've been through this one time before, right? And one of the reasons why I didn't react as quickly as I did is because I felt obligated to the team that I had built. Like, I built a large organization with all the different components of property management and all that kind of stuff like that. Real estate and sales and loans. And I felt obligated to keep people on longer than I should. So right now, I don't, with the construction teams, like when we go down in volume, I don't feel obligated necessarily to keep them busy. Where if they're on my payroll, I would. And so that's part of the reason why we never brought them in. I have a good buddy that runs in-house crews and loves it. I was always concerned about being obligated to keep people busy when it didn't make sense for the organization.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I'm just curious how these, I mean, you're doing such huge volume. I'm just curious how these big organizations choose to kind of run that. That's very interesting. And the whole time you've got this incredibly successful podcast that you've been running for at least 2.5 years, it seems like.
3 years this month. Yeah.
So it'll be 3 years this month. Mm-hmm. Talk about that. Talk about, I know you run a mastermind too. You have an education component. Talk about doing everything that you're doing over here on the flip side, actually like rehabbing properties, wholesaling properties, very successful business on this side. And now you're over here on more of like the media side, the education side with the podcast. I know you have a mastermind too. Talk about that. Why did you decide to do that?
The podcast. Okay. So basically I got into a point in my organization where I wasn't seeing the properties every day. I wasn't involved in the necessarily the day-to-day operations. And so mistake number one, the first time around, was I didn't stay within my core competency, which was real estate. I started, like I said, a restaurant nightclub. I was working on a sunglass line. I was doing all kinds of these crazy things. And so the podcast was more so to keep me grounded. And also it would, for lack of a better term, it was an opportunity, right? It was an opportunity to talk to incredibly smart people out there that were smarter than me and learn some stuff. So that's where it came from originally. There wasn't really a plan behind it other than I wanted to talk to really smart people. I wanted to share what I had to share, and I wanted to stay within my core competency. I'm literally in an office right now that we've been in for the last 7 years in a little studio. I'm here every day. I'm still plugged into my organization to a large extent. I have a COO now that's starting to take over the day-to-day operations. So I don't do like I'm part of my real estate organization on a day-to-day basis, but I don't handle the day-to-day operations. I have an office person that handles the office. I have a COO that runs the whole organization. My project managers handle all the projects. And I've been lucky enough to have some really incredible people work for me that handle it. And that's really the advantage that I have right now, is that I have just some really, really incredible people that get what I was building, that are behind what I was building, and that are owning their positions in a way that it's just made me really lucky. So that's where they came from. The mastermind component, I was part of an organization, coaching for a couple of years. I'd done some one-off live events before that, and when I left that organization, I felt a need to create something where I could really pour into it. Again, mainly to stay in my lane, but also to give back and to help other people, learn and grow and figure out some of the things I figured out that have made me not go crazy in my organization. And so that's where that came from. That's new. I mean, we're actually having our first meeting November 4th and 5th of this year for the mastermind. And yeah, so I want to impact businesses and change lives. I want to stay an operator because I love being an operator, and I want to impact businesses and change lives. So that's where that comes from.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Don's podcast, you can see, if you're watching the video version, you can see in his background, it's called Flip Talk. So definitely go check that out. Don, how else can people get a hold of you or find out what you're up to?
They can reach out to me via email at don@fliptalk.com. I'm all over Facebook. I have a personal page. I have the Flip Talk podcast page. We have the Flip Talk group. There's a dozen places they can reach out. I've been putting out content for 3 years. They can find me on YouTube. Search Don Costa Real Estate, because there's a Don Costa composer that always takes my SEO. But yeah, I've been putting out content for 3 years. I mean, I really like impacting business and change life. There's something really cool about somebody, you run into them and they say, that one thing you said, I implemented my business and it made a big change. So I enjoy it and love it. Reach out to me. Let me know if there's something that I can do, I can put out to help, or, you have a question or whatever. I mean, I'm always available.
Guys, go check out the Flip Talk podcast. Don, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and talk to us. Really just kind of open up the hood a little bit onto your business and showing us kind of what you're up to and why you've kind of made that shift to a little bit more wholesaling. I think there's a lot of value there, and I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you. Appreciate being on.
Guys, and we love you so much, and we're so thankful that you joined us to listen to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Live podcast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. We love you so much, and we'll see you next time.